corner of the universe be considered Genesis revisited. This is the belief of the world-renowned archaeologist, linguist, and expert in the field of cultural anthropology, Zecharia Sitchin.
I'm Zecharia Sitchin. I devoted a lifetime to the study of ancient civilizations, ancient languages, their art, their beliefs, and the knowledge that they had. And the question is, when you study, when you look at all that, is it myth, is it mythology, or did it really happen? I believe it all really happened.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Space is the inescapable challenge to all the advanced nations of the Earth. And it established the United States as the preeminent spacefaring nation. First for the coming decade, for the 1990s, Space Station Freedom, and next for the new century, back to the moon, back to the future, and this time back to stay. And then a journey into tomorrow, a journey to another planet, a manned mission to Mars.
A manned mission to Mars? An ambitious objective, and with the success of the Mars probes and NASA's rover, one that humanity has made substantial strides toward achieving. Could there have been a space base on Mars in antiquity?
If we had physical, tangible evidence of artifacts on Mars, we are not only not alone in the universe, but someone has been on the next planet over. That in itself will forever change our frame of reference.
Mankind came out of the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, reached the Age of Enlightenment, experienced the Industrial Revolution, and entered the era of advanced technology, the era of genetic engineering, and the era of spaceflight.
Big shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds forward, drift. We copy you down, Eagle. The Eagle has landed.
Astronauts who land like eagles. Zecharia Sitchin's research reveals that in our ancient past there were advanced beings referred to as the Anunnaki, translated, those who from heaven to earth came.
The idea that there was in our solar system a race of intelligent beings far older than us who are now gone would certainly force us to rethink lots of questions, including the question of human origins. Where did we come from? Could we be the products of genetic engineering?
The hypothesis that modern science is only now catching up with ancient knowledge is inspiring scientists and researchers to increase efforts to rediscover that which may have been lost over time.
It rekindles a situation that has lain dormant almost 5,500 years. The incident of the Tower of Babel. In the Babylonian version of the biblical story, the people of Babylon were building a tower whose head shall reach the heaven, in which a Shem, a space rocket, was to be installed under the direction of their supreme god. But the other deities were not amused by this foray of mankind into the space age.
The biblical story recalls that Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower that the humans were building, and he said to his colleagues in Genesis chapter 11,
"This is just the beginning of their undertakings. From now on, anything that they shall scheme to do shall no longer be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they should not understand each other's speech."
Thanks to the science of archaeology, experts now know that the first great civilization emerged almost 6,000 years ago. Older than the Greeks, older than the Mayans, older than the Incas. The people of this society were called Sumerians, after their land, Sumer, in the Great Plain between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, today's Iraq. The book of Genesis calls the land Shinear. For generations, biblical scholars either ignore biblical references to ancient kingdoms or categorize these as legend or lore. Through the study of historical relics and the translation of ancient languages, many biblical researchers now believe that the previously questioned Old Testament references are indeed historically authentic accounts of flourishing, advanced cultures.
If you study the Genesis document, God made Adam out of clay and then took Eve out of his rib, one of his ribs, etc. If you study this document, you discover that it's really a much shorter version of a much more complicated document that comes out of Babylonia and then out of Sumer and so on. Now, these ancient texts give a really complicated story of powerful, non-human, godlike beings actually engineering us, making us for specific purposes.
Zecharia Sitchin's investigation into these cultures brings him to this 6,000-year-old temple in an excavated area of the ancient city Erech. Until its discovery only 150 years ago, Erech was known only through passages in the Bible. The temple is dedicated to a female goddess named Inanni, also referred to in later times as Ishtar. Zecharia Sitchin.
You can see here her features a little damaged. Her divinity was marked by the pair of horns that she had. She held a jar with the water of life, and she was surrounded as a decoration, but perhaps also symbolically, with a symbol that some refer to as entwined snakes, which was the symbol of science in those days, 6,000 years ago. Some find in it a precursor of the Egyptian Ankh, which was the symbol of life and creation.
Further results of Mr. Sitchin's research affirm the theory that this visage of entwined snakes is the symbol for genetic manipulation of DNA. Carved out in stone over 6,000 years ago, Ishtar is sometimes depicted flying through the sky and leaving the Earth's atmosphere to traverse the heavens. In ancient Mesopotamia, the secrets of astronomy and other celestial knowledge are kept carefully guarded, studied behind closed doors by an exclusive society of priest astronomers. Cylinder seals like these are the only surviving record of these carefully guarded secrets. This clay tablet carries the print of a cylinder seal about 4,500 years old. It depicts the god Enlil granting the plow to humankind, ushering in the age of modern agriculture. On closer inspection, something completely remarkable can be seen. A detailed depiction of the complete solar system configured identically to that known to contemporary science. With the sun prominently figured in the center, each planet appears in its correct position and relative proportions to the other planetary bodies. On the outskirts is one additional planet, a 10th, not currently located by astronomers of our modern era. Astronomers around the world are on the lookout for this evasive celestial sphere, as a growing body of physical evidence indicates that it does in fact exist.
History records the discovery of the planet Pluto as February 18, 1930, by astronomer Clyde Tombaugh. Yet, Pluto is clearly shown on the imprint taken from the Sumerian cylinder seal. There is also one additional planet, the one that scientists refer to as the mysterious Planet X, the yet undiscovered most distant member of our solar system.
According to modern science, prior to the invention of the telescope in the 1600s, humanity had no knowledge of outlying planets beyond Jupiter, as these bodies cannot be viewed with the naked eye. Since the day of Galileo Galilei, optical astronomers have amassed an important body of knowledge about the outer planets. These theories established by astronomers from around the globe have been uncontested these last centuries. With the technological advancements of our day, new vantage points have developed, such as the unobstructed view of NASA's Hubble telescope and the perspective gained through unmanned probes sent on reconnaissance missions to the outer reaches of our solar system. These breakthroughs in space exploration reveal many inaccuracies in earlier astronomical conclusions. On August 19, 1977, the American space probe Voyager 2 leaves Cape Canaveral on a several-year journey to the vicinity of this solar system's most distant planets. The Voyager's discoveries challenge many of astronomy's recent conclusions, while fully corroborating ancient knowledge. For the first time, we see images of Uranus. Astonishingly, it is exactly as the Sumerians report in their 6,000-year-old description. Though they have no telescopes that we know of, the Sumerians characterize Uranus as Mash Sig, translated bright greenish. They also explain the unique planetary tilt of Uranus. According to the Sumerians, our solar system was invaded by a planetary body that caused collisions and disrupted the existing order. NASA scientists concur that a collision with a body the size of Earth, traveling at 40,000 miles per hour, could have caused both the orbital skew of Uranus and the devastation apparent from the planet's surface scarring. Its neighbor Neptune was described as a blue-green planet by the Sumerians millennia ago, but science has only confirmed this fact during the past few decades. The Sumerians named and listed all of the planets in our solar system. Their documented list of these planets is tangible evidence that in at least one respect, modern man is on a path of rediscovery.
That ancient knowledge included the planets Uranus and Neptune, supposedly unknown until discovered in 1781 and 1846, and even Pluto, not discovered until 1930.
Neptune, Nudimmud, the artful creator. Uranus, Anu, he of the heavens. Saturn, Anshar, foremost of the heavens. Jupiter, Kishar, foremost of firm lands. The asteroid belt, Rakish, the hammered bracelet. Mars, Lamu, god of war. And Ki, Earth, what the Sumerians considered to be the seventh planet. Why the seventh planet? Why not the third, as Earth is so often referred to in modern parlance? Sumerian records indicate that they began their counting not from the sun, but from a planet on the outside of the solar system.
But most surprising was the inclusion of one more large planet as the 12th member of our solar system.
The launch of Pioneer 10 in 1972 ushers in the era of deep space exploration. The craft journeys beyond the outer known planets, sending back data that is used to seek a possible 10th planet.
14 August 1978, which was just about 6 weeks after we discovered the fact that Pluto has a satellite. Once you have a satellite for a planet, you can determine how heavy it is. It turns out Pluto was very much smaller and lighter weight than we had thought, which meant that Pluto has no influence, no appreciable influence on the motions of the planets Uranus and Neptune. At that point, we voiced the hypothesis that this means that there is at least one yet to be discovered planet in the outer reaches of the solar system.
Over the past 2 decades, physicists have joined astronomers in the search for the mysterious Planet X.
One of the things we did in 1978, having made this prediction that there was an additional planet, 10th or 12th, depending on your point of view, we sort of put our money where our mouth was, as it were, and we went out and we started looking for this thing. We've been able to refine the search area somewhat, get it rather narrowed down. We do our predictions based on the observed anomalies in Uranus and Neptune. We actually are currently looking down in the region of Centaurus, which is just south of the constellation Libra. But if it is in the kind of orbit that we describe here, it would have to be a planet that would have a mass something like 3 to 5 times the mass of the Earth. This would put it intermediate between the gaseous planets like Uranus and Neptune and the terrestrial planets that we have in the inner part of the solar system. So if If this planet turns out to be in a 3,600-year orbit, then its mass will be correspondingly larger. This one here is a map of the solar system as we know it. The inner planets, this is the orbit of planet Pluto. And this here is the orbit that I have proposed for the 10th planet. And here's where we think it is right about now in its orbit.
If Planet X exists, we are not alone in this solar system.
Earth, the seventh planet. The sacred number 7, 7 days in the week, 7 days of Genesis, 7 tablets of creation. A case can be made for historical coincidence, but to Zecharia Sitchin, this kind of numeric repetition points to more than just legend. Whichever way you look at it, the facts about this 10th planet are nothing less than astonishing.
The story of this planet, as told by the Sumerians on their 7 tablets of creation, begins 4 billion years ago, when our solar system was much younger and our own planet Earth did not yet exist.
The surviving historical records of the Sumerians reveal the story of an intruder planet, Nibiru, which appeared out of deep space, drawn into the center of our solar system by the planetary pull of Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. On an opposing orbital path with the 7th planet, a planet referred to in Sumerian records as Tiamat, Nibiru's new orbit around the Sun placed the 2 planets on a collision course.
Sumerian cosmogony answers many puzzles that still baffle modern science. Central to it was the tale of a celestial collision and knowledge of a solar system with 12 members.
As they draw near, one of the satellites of Nibiru crashes into Tiamat, cracking the planet. Subsequent collisions smash half of Tiamat completely, breaking the pieces into what develops mostly into the asteroid belt. This is referred to in the Bible and Sumerian text as the firmament. The other half of Tiamat becomes Earth. The Earth is thrust into a new orbital position, carrying with it Tiamat's main satellite, our moon. Nibiru, the intruder, is cast into a permanent clockwise solar orbit, returning to Earth's neighborhood once each 3,600 years, forever becoming the 12th member of our solar system.
This tale of creation echoed through all the ancient cultures, becoming part of the scientific knowledge that we find in the Old Testament, in the creation story of Genesis.
In the aftermath of the collision, the biblical creator Elohim proclaims,
"Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas.
if Earth is the orbital remains of a planetary collision, scientists believe that the most obvious place to look for planetary scarring is 7 miles below the surface of the Pacific Ocean.
When in the heights heavens had not been named, and below earth had not been called, naught but primordial Apsu, their begetter, Mamu, and Tiamat, she who bore them all. Their waters were mingled together.
2 planets mingled together. The biblical passage of Genesis reads,
In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light. And there was light.
If we apply the knowledge of the Mesopotamian text to the biblical text, the correct reading of the book of Genesis emerges, especially in relation to waters.
And Elohim said, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And Elohim made the firmament, dividing the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament. And Elohim called the firmament heaven.
Upper waters? Lower waters? What does the Bible mean by this? The Sumerians describe Uranus and Neptune as watery planets. What are the conclusions of modern science? In 1979, 1980, and 1981, Pioneer and Voyager visit Jupiter and Saturn with their many moons. During these missions, water is discovered virtually everywhere, as ice on the surface and as water below the surface. The Sumerians' ancient claim of water on Jupiter's moons Io and Europa is proven. The Sumerian records indicate water on Enceladus and Tethys, two of the moons of Saturn, and in that planet's spectacular rings. The findings of NASA confirm these ancient Sumerian assertions, giving further credence and clarity to the biblical quote, "waters above the firmament." Halley's Comet travels through space, itself a spectacular confirmation of the biblical claim, "waters above the firmament." Nearly 4 billion years old, with a core half the size of Manhattan Island, this mystic traveler throws off water at the rate of 30 to 70 tons a second, with enough mass to continue its purge for thousands of years. Was ancient man aware of this spectral vision?
The unusual celestial object, reported in Babylonian texts to have been seen in the year 164 BC, is believed to have been Halley's Comet. Significantly, it was considered the scepter star of Israel.
In the Bible, the book of Numbers records,
I see it, though not now. I behold it, though it is not near. A star of Jacob did course. The scepter of Israel did arise.
Halley's Comet and its lights are truly the messengers of Genesis.
when the 19th century astronomer Schiaparelli announced that he had seen canals on Mars, he was ridiculed. So too was the respected American astronomer Lowell in 1916. When NASA's unmanned spacecraft visits Mars in the 70s and again in the 90s, ample evidence of water in that planet's past is revealed. Images from expeditions to Venus and Mars exhibit visual evidence of dry sea, lake, and riverbeds characteristic of the biblical reference, waters above the firmament. Even Mercury, so close to the Sun, seems to have had a watery past, yet maintaining ice at its polar caps. The NASA report reads, quote, "We are forced to no other conclusion but that we are seeing the effects of water on Mars," unquote. And, quote, "Mars once had enough water to form a layer several meters deep over the whole surface of the planet," unquote. What we previously believed to be a dry and barren planet unexpectedly emerges as a planet where water once existed in abundance. Mars joins Venus, Mercury, the Earth, and most recently the Earth's moon in corroborating the Sumerian concept of water below the firmament.
With the discovery of water on the moon and distant planets, the possibility of colonization suddenly becomes much more viable. Oxygen can be extracted from the water to be used in domed habitats on planets with minimal atmosphere. And water is one of the principal ingredients of rocket fuel. This find increases the possibility of unlimited treks across the stars.
We've had reports to the effect that the Viking equipment will never determine positively whether or not there's life on Mars. Can you set us straight on this?
Well, my own view is it's much too soon to decide whether we will have a definitive answer. It may be that there is an exotic biology on Mars. It may be that there's an exotic chemistry which looks a little bit like biology. There's a number of experiments to be done. They might decide the issue, they might not. But either way, Viking has been a biological success because the chemical explanation means that there is a kind of chemistry on the Martian surface which simulates some of the steps of chemistry in biology. We would learn something important about the origin of life.
In October 1988, the Soviet Union sends two unmanned spacecraft, Phobos 1 and 2, named for one of the Martian moons, to study the red planet. Phobos 1 is lost while on its way to Mars. But Phobos 2 arrives to orbit Mars and immediately sends images back to Earth. On March 1st, 1989, pictures of this unusual grid are received. The grid, here in the upper right, is shot both in the optical range and in the infrared range. Later, they are merged into this composite overlay. On March 26th, Phobos 2 sends these images to Earth, taken just south of the equator. An unexplained elliptical shape appears.
This shadow actually appeared all of a sudden. Why am I calling it a shadow? Because you can see things through it.
This elliptical shadow, then, is it in Mars' atmosphere or on the planet's surface?
One thing is for sure. This something is not positioned horizontally.
Well, to me it looks like a rocket taking off from the surface of Mars and leaving a trail behind.
Well, if you'd want to fantasize, it could be interpreted that way too. Now we think we ought to look at the real circumstances that have caused that trail, even though they haven't yet been fully clarified. That's more likely to be the shadow of some object, since surface elements can be seen through it.
How long will it take to process all of the information to get more or less objective scientific results, rather than fantastic ones?
Come back in a week.
1 week later, no details are given. Then, unexpectedly, this report.
Last year, the Soviets launched 2 spacecraft to the planet, both named after the Martian moon, Phobos. Their mission was to photograph Mars and land probes on its moon. One was accidentally switched off by a mission operator. But the second reached Mars and transmitted pictures that are still puzzling Soviet scientists. As it swung over the equator, it took pictures from a height of 6,000 kilometers. This is an infrared photograph. It shows differences in temperature. The dark patches are colder. This section covers 600 kilometers. It shows objects down to the size of 2 kilometers. It's the most detailed infrared picture of the planet's surface.
We have some very, very thin lines on the surface of Mars in the infrared, which means it's heat. It's not visible, it's heat. You can see it through clouds if you want to do. These have a resolution, these have a width, I would guess, of 3 or 4 kilometers wide. Now, in answer to the question of what it is, I certainly don't know. The Russians aren't telling us.
Scientists are also puzzled by this shadow pictured on the surface of Mars by both optical and heat-seeking cameras. They're convinced it's a shadow because they can see objects on the surface beneath. But a shadow of what? Finally, there's the mystery of the vanishing spacecraft. The Russians have yet to release the last picture transmitted by Phobos before it lost contact with ground control. But the Russians have said that it shows an object coming towards the spacecraft, an object which, in their words, should not have been there.
The spacecraft was circling Mars, coming into the same orbit as the moons of Mars. And the last picture, they got halfway through it, and they saw something there which shouldn't be there. Professor Kapitsa makes the joke that it's Martian people.
British scientists will be able to judge for themselves when the Soviets bring their pictures to a conference at Exeter next month. Because, of course, there must be a sensible explanation, mustn't there?
The Russians do not bring any pictures to the Exeter conference. How does the Russian Space Agency explain the spacecraft's destruction or disappearance?
It does take a minimum of precision criteria to obtain on the image these spots, which some would like to call flying saucers, that appeared within the visual field of the infrared range. It must be pointed out that the flying saucer version is not ours. Actually, at first we were saying that there was no flying saucer, that surely all that we saw could be explained in understandable, natural and physical terms.
One possibility could easily be that a small meteorite, a small bit of rock, was in the same orbit of Phobos and hit it.
In an exclusive interview conducted in October 1990 in Moscow, Professor Lev Mukhin of the Soviet Space Research Institute discredits the meteorite theory.
There were attempts to hypothesize that there had been a collision between the space probe, which was then orbiting Mars in alignment with the orbit of Mars' moonlet, and strands of dust surrounding the moon Phobos itself. But some fairly accurate computations made by several organizations, and by our institute as well, have shown that this assumption is totally baseless.
If not meteorite or debris, then what could possibly explain the mishap? A long silence follows. Then in December 1991, Marina Popovich, former cosmonaut trainee and retired Air Force colonel, holds a surprise press conference at the Russian consulate in San Francisco. She unearths the mysterious last photograph taken by Phobos. There is a strange shape in the foreground. Colonel Popovich refers to this as an unidentified flying object. a UFO. The object is juxtaposed against what appears to be the planet's tiny moonlet, Phobos, for which the craft is named. But how is the mysterious shadow explained? The Russians say it is a shadow of some object on or just above the Martian surface. Upon further examination in April 1992, when all of the related photographs are compared side by side, scientists reach the conclusion that the shadow is actually moving. If Mars was indeed the site of a space base in antiquity, could the failure of these Soviet space missions be attributed to some sort of alien intervention? Could the ancient space base have been reactivated?
So the mystery remains, what caused the spacecraft to destabilize? Was it a malfunction, or was there an outside cause, perhaps an impact? The question that arises is indeed a simple one. Was the spacecraft Phobos 2 hit by something that put it out of commission? The circumstances in which Phobos 2 was lost suggest that someone might be back on Mars, someone ready to knock out what to them is an alien spacecraft.
Was Phobos deactivated by intelligent beings wishing to protect themselves from outsiders? Or perhaps there's some other more conventional explanation? We may never know. But indulging the possibilities of otherworldly visitors in the present will help us acclimate to their differences, if and when they finally do come calling. The question remains, how would we as a culture respond to incontrovertible evidence of a species of beings that not only preceded our own, but actually engineered mankind?
Of all the elusive mysteries, the greatest is the riddle of life itself. How did it begin? From what corner of the universe did the first emanations of existence arise? Was the seed of life carried to Earth from the planet Nibiru?
There has been a blending of interest in biologists on one hand and planetary astronomers on the other in the question of the origin of life. Because the same questions about how life originated on Earth also would apply to Mars or some other solar system. And just as they really can't explain how life originated on Earth, they don't really know how it originated elsewhere.
Contemporary scientific thinking cautiously asserts that life arrives on Earth when certain chemical substances crash into the surface aboard a stray comet early in our planet's history.
What we are trying to find out in the meteorites is to see whether there are any of these molecules related to life. There are certain molecules, like the amino acids, which may be described as the building blocks of life.
Directed panspermia, another scientific theory, suggests that life on Earth is seeded by a race of beings from outside the planet, not by chance, but as the deliberate activity of an otherworldly society. The Bible suggests that the creation of humankind comes at the end of a long list.
All the fishes of the sea, and all the fowl that fly the skies, and all the animals that fill the earth, and all the creeping things that crawl upon the earth. It was only then that Elohim created the atom.
In the last few pages of the story of creation, the Sumerians point to the Anunnaki as the creators of mankind, our own benefactors of life. According to Sumerian text, the Anunnaki, in advance of landing 445,000 years ago, sent androids to scout the Earth. 150,000 years later, the Anunnaki themselves arrive and create humankind. How was Adam created? According to the Sumerians, it was by genetic engineering, fertilization in vitro, in a glass tube, as depicted in this cylinder seal rendering.
Adam was the first test tube baby.
In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, the Bible reads,
"Let us make the atom in our image and likeness."
But why? Sumerian documentation suggests the Anunnaki create humanity to assist in mining African gold that they need to save the dwindling atmosphere of their home planet, Nibiru.
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the three great Western traditions, religious traditions, are all founded on the idea that there's something special about human beings. We didn't arrive here accidentally, so we're not just some consequence of billions of years of pointless accidental permutations of life forms. No, we were created in the image of God. The creation really is about the process of our salvation. Now, what if it were the case that there were creatures both technologically more advanced than us, older than us in terms of their civilization, and maybe even more intelligent than us, and more spiritually advanced, if we could imagine that? Then would this cause the creation story to collapse and leaving, literally billions of people on the planet totally confused about the meaning of life?
The Bible relates an incident of mankind overstepping the bounds of the Anunnaki when the Babylonians attempt to reach the gods by building an enormous launch pad in the archetypal story of the Great Tower of Babel. What is the target of their efforts? According to Zecharia Sitchin, it is our neighboring planet Mars, home of the Anunnaki's way station en route to Earth.
The Sumerian tablets refer to the station planet Mars as the traveler's ship. I've taken it to mean that it was at Mars that the Anunnaki from Nibiru transferred to smaller spacecraft to reach Earth orbiting stations. Not once every 3,600 years, but on a more frequent schedule.
Mesopotamian archives identify the 12 members of our solar system with specific symbols. Some, like Mars, Earth, and Venus, are indicated numerically on this ancient stela.
We see the sun with its many rays. We see another 4 depicted standing on their cult animals, but really it's a symbolism connected with the zodiac. We see the moon, and we see the earth symbolized by the 7 dots, which indicated the position of the earth from the outer limits of the solar system, counting or coming in inwards by somebody flying into from outer space.
The 7 dots of Earth with its crescent moon and the 6-pointed star of Mars are revealing clues in this 4,500-year-old Sumerian depiction. 2 figures stand on either side of a craft. Some researchers believe that Mars was habitable as little as 10,000 years ago.
A 10th planet? A mysterious species with the technology to genetically engineer humankind? A few years ago, most of us would have laughed at these ideas, but after the cloning of Dolly the sheep and some of the breakthroughs in genetic engineering, these concepts begin to sound more plausible. When we come back, we'll look at some photographic evidence that raises more serious questions about what the mysterious Anunnaki may have left behind.
When the United States launches the Mariner and Viking spacecraft to explore Mars in the 60s and 70s, enigmatic structures resembling those on Earth are photographed. This is a feature on Mars that NASA nicknames the Inca City. Here we see it compared with Sacsayhuaman, Peru. These are lines on the Mars surface. These are the Nazca lines in Peru.
I feel that what has been discovered so far is very suggestive of intelligent layout, but it would be irresponsible of me to say, I have proof. What I have is evidence which makes it appear as though it's been designed by some kind of intelligent thinking process, which is probably even more advanced than our current in some ways.
I was especially intrigued by independent researchers' suggestions in their reports that the orientation of the face and adjoining pyramid indicated they were built in alignment with sunrise at solstice time on Mars about 450,000 years ago.
Could it be that a civilization capable of space travel almost 500,000 years ago visited this part of the solar system, leaving behind monuments on Earth and Mars? The only beings mentioned by name are the Anunnaki. The only evidence supporting such a theory is evidence of visits by the Anunnaki.
We have seen societies on Earth that have been demolished by cultural cross-representation, if you like. Meeting a more advanced culture has had a severe impact on an existing culture. But I think we're intelligent enough to be prepared for that.
Our civilization is technologically able to venture out into deep space on scientific quests of discovery. Can anyone then deny the possibility that members from a technologically more advanced world may have visited our solar system thousands of years ago? Thanks to the work of Zecharia Sitchin and others like him, we know more than we ever have about ancient cultures and the life that came before.
Is this Genesis revisited? Did the Sumerians in their ancient tablets reveal that we're only now catching up with ancient knowledge? Do the discoveries making headlines today originate with our ancient ancestors? Was this ancient knowledge given to the people of Sumeria by those distant explorers from the mysterious 10th planet, Nibiru, the Anunnaki? The final answers may lay buried in those yet to be uncovered volumes of the Phenomenon Archives.
Minority of the population. For example, if you show people a photograph which is actually being computer generated of them from their childhood going on a balloon ride, and this photograph is in with lots of photographs from things in their childhood which really did take place, a sizable minority will actually quite happily tell you about the time they went up in a hot air balloon when they were 6, even though that event never actually took place. We do know that we're all potentially prone to these false memories, much more so than we would ever have once guessed.
False memory syndrome is based on the idea that memory is faulty. And memory is faulty. Obviously, I'm living proof that memory is faulty the older I get. The fact is, though, that memory is not so faulty that people are going to forget entire events. They might get details wrong. They might get their chronology out of order a little bit. But the fact that they were, for example, in a train crash or something like that, they're not going to forget that event. Without anecdotal evidence, without human memory, without the ability to retrieve memories, we would not have a judicial system and a civilization would grind to a halt.
Psychologists have developed a wide range of plausible theories to explain why individuals believe they've been abducted by aliens. But all of them have ultimately been countered by ufologists.
It has ranged from simply lying to psychosis, it's mass hallucination, it's mass hysteria. It goes on and on and on. There is no end to it.
However, skeptics believe there is one simple factor that makes their case watertight.
As a scientist, I'm interested in the question of whether or not there is anything happening here in terms of objective reality. If there's no way of us being able to produce any kind of evidence, hard physical evidence, then I'd say that what we're looking at is essentially a psychological phenomenon.
In order to really challenge the skeptic's argument, ufologists need to find evidence that can stand up to scientific scrutiny. In France, one of the Real 4400 believe they may hold the proof ufologists have been looking for.
Je me considère absolument rationnel, à la fois dans les activités et dans les pensées que j'ai.
Eric Julien is a retired pilot and air traffic controller whose career involved making tough decisions while under immense pressure.
Pour exercer le métier qui demande une stabilité psychologique extrêmement importante, tant pour être pilote que pour être contrôleur aérien.
Over the past 15 years, Eric claims to have had a variety of extraterrestrial experiences, both at home and at work.
C'est également le contact radar d'un target sur mon scope radar lorsque j'étais contrôleur aérien dans l'armée de l'air, qui allait de l'est vers l'ouest à 28 000 km/h.
As well as sightings, Eric claims to have had regular contact and communication with alien beings that have given him a clear understanding of their technology.
C'est que nos outils scientifiques de preuve sont limités à l'espace matériel de la réalité. Et c'est toute la difficulté que nous avons à comprendre le comportement des extraterrestres précisément.
After enduring years of abduction experiences, Eric believes he has recently been left with solid evidence of their visits.
Un élément de preuve qui peut être apporté donc à la science, c'est l'apparition soudaine en l'espace. You see it? Pourrait être un implant qui a été posé par des extraterrestres au cours d'une nuit.
Eric's lump provides science with something tangible it can test. But Bud Hopkins believes his 30 years of research has already unearthed all the evidence that anyone would need.
The skeptics are fond of saying there's no physical evidence. What the skeptics are saying, gee, I haven't heard of any because I haven't looked into it. Okay, these are some of the photographs of scoop marks that turn up again and again. I may have seen 100 of these. Why don't the critics recognize it? It's because they don't even know anything about it.
Bud has collected photographs of abductees who claim their experience left them with abnormal scars.
This is on a man's back. Here's another one on the front of the shin. This is one on a little boy that turned up overnight. He was 5 years old. I had one case where there were 3 young women involved in an abduction experience. At the end of it, each one had a scoop mark in exactly the same place. The doctors who have looked at these things have told me that they most closely resemble the scars from punch biopsies. Sometimes they will take 2 samples. The person is re-abducted and another sample is taken. Sometimes people remember the tool that was used. One can infer without much difficulty that they're taking a flesh sample to take from us our own DNA, our own physical genetic makeup. Again, these are marks which turn up again and again, but we have no explanation of exactly why they are taking this flesh, except obviously they're getting some kind of sample.
Eric has come to London to visit a leading ear, nose and throat specialist and have the lump behind his ear tested.
Hello. Hello, this is Eric Julien to see Dr. Patel, please.
Come on in.
He's hoping the results will make sense of his belief that the lump is in fact an alien implant.
C'est peut-être une découverte étonnante et qui pourra intéresser beaucoup de gens. Glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Okay, let's take a look at this lump. And it's not tender at all if I was to touch it like this, not causing any pain or discomfort? No.
Et que ce qui est le plus étrange dans cet implant, c'est qu'il bouge tout seul. Il a bougé de 12 mm en 6 mois.
Just turn your head slightly away from me.
Et je ne connais pas de corps organique dans le corps humain qui puisse faire ce type d'exploit.
This could be easy to diagnose further by doing a couple of tests. And I propose that we do an ultrasound of this area and a plain X-ray, and that should give us a lot more information.
One of the reasons why Eric believes his lump is an implant is due to the nature of his experiences that took place in the summer of 2003.
Hello, Mr. Julian. Alice McLean, I'm the radiologist.
Parmi les expériences que j'ai connues, il y avait des expériences médicales.
You've got a lump or a problem behind your ear, I understand.
Yes,
okay.
that's here. J'étais donc souvent allongé sur une espèce de lit dans une salle qui ressemblait à celle d'un dentiste et j'ai plusieurs fois connu des expériences de sondes au-dessus du crâne et dessus sur le front.
All right, that's probably all we need.
Once the ultrasound and X-ray results are processed and evaluated,
Eric Julian, post-auricular ultrasound.
The consultant will be able to provide Eric with a clear diagnosis of his lump. Experience. Rachel, Anne and the boys were left confused by what it was they experienced.
The next day we talked about it again and you just wanted to know who else had seen it, but you just didn't know how to to find that out. And, you know, we talked about a number of things, and Mum came up with the idea of phoning the radio station, the local radio station.
A family from North Lancashire have been describing how they saw a mysterious light in the sky last night. Rachel Devereux was driving on the moors between Ingleton and Bentham with her 2 children and her mother, Anne. They all saw a bright light move at great speed and change directions. Anne says she's never seen anything like it before.
This was like a really, really bright, pure white light in a perfect ball shape. No trails, nothing.
Lots of people say, well, a few people have said they've seen this light, seriously. Keith near Clitheroe, Vera in Clitheroe, and Ian in Fenniscoles.
A local UFO group also heard the family's story and made contact.
I got in touch with Anne first. I phoned her up, and that was shortly after they first saw the light. And she was very euphoric about it. She was just wanting to know what it was, really.
The UFO group were able to help Rachel and Anne document the events of the night, but the emotional support they could offer was limited.
We're a local UFO group. We're not professionally qualified at all. And I think it would be quite difficult for someone to go to their MP, the GP. There isn't anyone who can deal with people who've got a strange experience like this. I think they will want to get answers to what happened to them during that time. Whether they will do is open to question.
You've got all these different factors in your life that are just a complete mystery.
It's helplessness, and it makes you cry, because you don't know how to stop it, you don't know what it was. It's making me cry now. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm crying. If you start to think about it like we are now, it becomes overwhelming, and you can't cope with it. They can mock you, the skeptics can say, oh, you've all got false memories and you all imagined it. But I know I didn't, because I know how it's made me feel inside.
More than anything, it's just wanting to make sense of it. That's the feeling it gives you. Just wanting more knowledge and wanting to make everything fit into place in a way that you can understand.
While these experiences often create feelings of fear and anxiety, not everyone who reports them find them distressing. In fact, many believe their contact with extraterrestrial beings has ultimately enriched their lives.
My first really conscious memory of my experiences with extraterrestrials was from about the age of 3 years old, where I would be meeting, I guess, like my other family. They were no different to me. I just saw them as my star family, like, and my parents here were my Earth family.
Tracy Taylor grew up in Perth, Western Australia, and claims to have had regular experiences that involved tests on her body and information put into her mind.
I think I learned pretty quick not to talk about it. I think I just focused it into my schoolwork and used the knowledge and the understandings that I had to do well at school.
Tracy's experiences intensified through her teens until she got to the point where she felt she needed to take control of what was going on.
I had to question my own sanity, basically. So I went along to visit psychiatrists, psychologists, asked for my brain to be scanned. I'm ready to think, they're going to take me off to the hospital in a minute. The brain scans showed up to be normal, all the psychological tests showed up to be fine. One of them walked up to me and said, is there anything really negative about this? And I said, well, not really, but it's hard to integrate into my life. And he said, well, good luck with it. I was just, what? Okay, this is confirmation for me, all right. And that was the end of it. I just walked out of there and thought, okay, I'll get on with it. I'll accept it.
Tracy now integrates her experiences into the rest of her life and focuses on the positive aspects they've brought her.
Also just prints.
Fantastic. There's a lot of symbolism here.
Yes.
She believes her contact with extraterrestrials has given her a unique artistic ability that she now wants to develop into a career.
The first time I ever did one of these drawings, I just had the urge to get my paper and my pen. Something just sort of came over me and my hand started to move.
Do you actually see anything, or is it just from within you?
Like a downloading of information, I suppose, in a symbolic form. It just sort of seems to feel like it comes through me, it's not from me.
Much more like a sort of radio wave.
Yeah, so It's
Tracy was interested in art before these illustrations came through, but claims that her style of drawing changed radically overnight.
I mean, this I recognise very much a sort of Aztec type of symbol.
Over a period of time, I spoke to people who study ancient cultures, and these people were able to pinpoint things in the pictures, saying this is something that you could find in a temple in Peru, and this is something you'd find in a temple in Luxor in Egypt.
And can an expert read this?
I've had linguists looking at it, and they say again that it's related to hieroglyphics in ancient Sumerian.
At various times over the past 6 years, Tracy has also produced a series of graphical illustrations, which she claims she later discovered hold a hidden message.
And that circle's dropping over the top of that pyramid.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and yet again it fits. So these were all done over different periods of time, and yet they all lock together
Yes.
to form a whole. Looking at it just on a purely surface level, there is an element of storytelling.
Apparently this depicts the past and moving into the present and then moving into the future.
And that element of storytelling I can relate to because they have a similarity to stained glass windows and telling a spiritual story.
And the lotus blossoms.
And that bursting forth, yeah. We probably never know the answer of where it comes from and how it gets to be in a pencil at the tip of her hand. But you can't take away from the fact that there is something there.
It's common for abductees to claim to be given special abilities as a result of their experience. Typically, these will include the ability to heal or to be able to pass on messages to humanity.
If in some way the messages that are coming through me can assist other people and the planet that they're connected to, I think it's great.
One of the things that has to always be borne in mind about the abduction experience is that the communication in virtually all these cases is telepathic. So one has to assume that every abductee can pick up thoughts from the aliens and communicate non-verbally. Therefore, that's a basic paranormal gift. Is that something that only abductees have, or is that something that might be more extensively present in the population? We don't really know.
Believers argue that people who return with enhanced psychic abilities provide yet further proof that their experience was real.
People who've had this experience claim that they have unusual powers. But in actual fact, they don't seem able to demonstrate these powers under controlled conditions. If they could, then that would be absolutely amazing. But at the moment, the wider scientific community doesn't even accept that these kind of claimed powers are real.
Skeptics continue to dismiss the types of evidence ufologists and believers have to offer. But can they ignore the medical opinion of a qualified surgeon? Especially one who claims that strange objects he has removed from abductees defy earthly explanation.
We have those which are metallic and covered with this very, very strange membrane. And at the time of surgery, it can't be cut with a surgical blade. It's impervious to cutting.
Rachel Devereaux had her first missing time experience just 3 months ago while driving home. Having looked into the phenomenon, she has decided to take a bold but common step for people who have had this type of encounter.
Hi. Hi.
She's going to have hypnotic regression.
I'm feeling quite nervous about it, about the regression, but also quite excited.
Right, so you might not have done this before, but I've done it a few thousand times.
Rachel's hoping that under hypnosis she can be taken back to when she had her experience and retrieve memories that are not consciously accessible.
I want it to be an honest account, you know, if I do remember.
How do you feel?
happy.
Yeah. You so feel that, it's okay. It's okay to feel. Stay with it.
It's no walls, it's just black everywhere. It's like standing in the middle of space. There's big bright light here, right in front of me. That's high, and that's watching what the little ones are doing, the small ones going round and looking at us and talking to each other. They think the boys are funny. They think we're funny. I can hear laughing now, the children laughing, they're really giggling. I'm scared for the children. But the light's there and it's just telling me it's fine and we're not going to hurt them. They're your children. They're your children, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Just feel yourself going back more and more alert. Good, well done. How do you feel?
Wow. I can't believe how real that felt.
From my perspective, having completed thousands of regressions over the years, she didn't fabricate that. She didn't pretend to cry.
Speechless. I'm just kind of speechless.
Do I believe everything that happened? I'm sort of 90% there, yeah, that it was real.
Testimonies obtained from abductees under hypnosis often provide compelling, detailed accounts of what happened during their missing time episode. They have given ufologists a mountain of anecdotal evidence to support their claims. But skeptics find these reports unreliable.
The alien abduction phenomenon, I think, is somewhat complicated by the whole debate about hypnosis. Let's be honest, scientists don't even agree on what hypnosis is.
People typically think that hypnotic regression is this kind of magic key for unlocking repressed or hidden memories. In actual fact, it's a great way of producing false memories. It's based on expectations, it's based on imagination, it's all woven together, and then they believe in this narrative.
In the hands of the wrong people, it can be disastrous, and in the hands of the right people, people who know what they're doing, who have adequate controls in place for false memories and things like that, hypnosis is an excellent tool for getting at the truth.
With such a major source of research ignored by skeptics, the need for unequivocal physical evidence is all the more important. In America, a surgeon has come forward with claims which may provide ufologists with the break they've been hoping for.
I started this as the ultimate skeptic. I was then embroiled in the phenomena and shown things that could not be satisfactorily explained by our own science.
Dr. Lear has been a practicing foot surgeon for the past 35 years. But in 1994, he began removing foreign bodies from patients who claimed they were alien implants.
I'm going to numb you up right now. Is that all right?
Okay, that's fine.
So we're going to numb the area up real good.
A lot of these people have things in their bodies which they've stepped on or they're exposed in a machine shop to a piece of metal.
We'll make a small incision right here, not a big one.
Others, unfortunately, have mental problems and would like to be an abductee.
Since he started in this area 8 years ago, Dr. Lear has conducted 11 operations and claims to have removed an assortment of mysterious objects.
Looks like it to me. Looks black. Yeah. Here it is, here. So let's put in a piece of white gauze. I think this is it. So we're going to x-ray to make sure.
We have those which are metallic and covered with this very, very strange membrane. And at the time of surgery, it can't be cut with a surgical blade. It's impervious to cutting. And researching the pathology books, no such entity has ever been found in the human body.
A logic explanation would be that it's not human tissue, of course.
However, when we get into the metals, that's when we really get into the strange stuff. We had help from the National Institute for Discovery Science, And they sent the first set of specimens to Los Alamos National Labs and to New Mexico Tech. Now, these were blind studies. All the studies are blind, and I mean by that the laboratories are not told the origin of the specimens. And the best analogy that the scientists were able to make initially were these were very close to meteorites.
The scientific community has generally disregarded Dr. Lear's claims. They feel his studies are inconclusive and are not supervised closely enough to rule out any chance that his samples may have been tampered with.
Metallic object in this container is being sealed.
Dr. Lear stands by his claims and thinks it is the skeptics who are at fault.
I have never met a skeptic yet that didn't know everything about what I was doing and drawn all the conclusions, but has never looked at one shred of the physical evidence or the data.
The moment of truth has arrived for Eric. With the X-ray and ultrasound results returned to the consultant, Eric is about to discover if the lump behind his ear is natural or extraterrestrial.
Il faudra que ce corps médical puisse aussi expliquer comment une telle protubérance peut bouger de 12 mm en 6 mois.
The first thing I want to show you is the ultrasound report and the ultrasound scan. And as you can see here, there is the lesion that we're looking at, and it's just under the surface of the skin. And the appearances of those in keeping with a cyst and nothing else. And when we look at the plain X-ray, there certainly is nothing metallic or anything of a hard consistency in this lump. And this is again in keeping with the diagnosis of a benign cystic lesion. We call it a sebaceous cyst. It's a collection of material from a blocked sweat gland. And it arises when a sweat pore becomes obstructed and the normal sebaceous material is not able to escape and therefore collects under the skin surface and forms a cystic collection.
Could it be possible to have an explanation about how a cyst could move from one point to another one?
There is no easy solution or answer to that problem. All I can speculate is that there may have been an episode of inflammation, which is typical of these cysts. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Oui, l'organisme peut être parfaitement naturel. Or, nous ignorons tout de la technologie des extraterrestres. Donc, on ne peut pas définitivement repousser l'hypothèse que ce soit un implant extraterrestre.
Although Dr. Patel believes his findings are conclusive, Eric remains unconvinced by such an orthodox diagnosis. And his concerns are shared by implant specialist Dr. Lear.
The object is certainly rectangular. The color is not normal for the skin. He claims that it has moved. That certainly negates something being a sebaceous cyst. Sebaceous, the word sebaceous comes from the word sebum, which is a gland attached to a hair follicle. And that becomes inflamed and infected, and that's how you get a sebaceous cyst. They would not move from one hair follicle to another.
If we got one of these implants and it turns out that it's of alien technology or that it's made of materials that wouldn't be easy to find on Earth, then great, it's a fantastic scientific breakthrough.
When dealing with this phenomenon, skeptics argue that the evidence does not exist, whereas ufologists say the evidence is there, but science just doesn't know how to interpret it. It would seem that without a miraculous breakthrough, there is little chance of either side reaching a common understanding. However, there are a new set of theories developed by the world's leading physicists that believers point to as holding the key to explaining this mystery.
A lot of physicists think we're entering a new golden age of theoretical physics. In a way, we're beginning to be able to address questions such as why is the universe here at all?
Dr. Brian Cox is a particle physicist who is directly involved with multi-million-dollar experiments to find out if the universe could contain hidden dimensions that are still to be discovered.
In the last 10 years, theories have been developed where we need other dimensions to explain the way the universe looks to us. So not only 3 dimensions, up, down and across, and even a 4th one, time, but actually something like 10 or 11 dimensions. That means there's a whole swathe of the universe out there that we really know very little about. Extra dimensions. There could be a centimetre away from my head, an entire universe with, things could live there for all we know. Also, there can be wormholes. So these are tunnels in space-time. So you could pop into a wormhole at one end of the universe and instantaneously appear at another end of the universe. And those tunnels could even be between one time in the universe to another. So they could, in principle, allow time travel to happen. Now, we don't know whether those things exist or not, but the theory allows them to exist.
These theories do not provide any evidence to support the claims of abductees, but they do offer a framework that can explain the universe and our place within it. And perhaps that's exactly what the missing time phenomenon is all about, trying to find a belief system that makes sense of our world and universe.
I think your belief system plays a part in interpreting, as it were, what you think you've seen. If you see a figure at the foot of your bed, if you're religious, you might think you've seen an angel. If you believe in the paranormal, you might say you've seen a ghost. If you're a ufologist, you might say that's an alien.
We live in a culture where it's easier to believe in God. It's saner to believe in a God than it is to believe that there's life on other planets. We have multiple witness sightings of people seeing extraterrestrials and their occupants. That's a no-no. There's a stigma. But if you believe in God, that's okay. I find that very interesting.
Most scientists agree that the universe is both old enough and large enough for extraterrestrial life to exist. Whether we've made contact with it yet depends on who or what you believe.
Someone doesn't believe Maya's prediction.
I'm sorry. It's not my fault.
The 4400 Tuesday at 9. And next here on Sky One, we're caught up in a murder.
You said we would be safe in Philadelphia.
Well, I was wrong. Harrison Ford stars in Witness.
Further results of Mr. Sitchin's research affirm the theory that this visage of entwined snakes is the symbol for genetic manipulation of DNA. Carved out in stone over 6,000 years ago, Ishtar is sometimes depicted flying through the sky and leaving the Earth's atmosphere to traverse the heavens. In ancient Mesopotamia, the secrets of astronomy and other celestial knowledge are kept carefully guarded, studied behind closed doors by an exclusive society of priest astronomers. Cylinder seals like these are the only surviving record of these carefully guarded secrets. This clay tablet carries the print of a cylinder seal about 4,500 years old. It depicts the god Enlil granting the plow to humankind, ushering in the age of modern agriculture. On closer inspection, something completely remarkable can be seen. A detailed depiction of the complete solar system configured identically to that known to contemporary science. With the sun prominently figured in the center, each planet appears in its correct position and relative proportions to the other planetary bodies. On the outskirts is one additional planet, a 10th, not currently located by astronomers of our modern era. Astronomers around the world are on the lookout for this evasive celestial sphere, as a growing body of physical evidence indicates that it does in fact exist.
History records the discovery of the planet Pluto as February 18, 1930, by astronomer Clyde Tombaugh. Yet, Pluto is clearly shown on the imprint taken from the Sumerian cylinder seal. There is also one additional planet, the one that scientists refer to as the mysterious Planet X, the yet undiscovered most distant member of our solar system.
According to modern science, prior to the invention of the telescope in the 1600s, humanity had no knowledge of outlying planets beyond Jupiter, as these bodies cannot be viewed with the naked eye. Since the day of Galileo Galilei, optical astronomers have amassed an important body of knowledge about the outer planets. These theories established by astronomers from around the globe have been uncontested these last centuries. With the technological advancements of our day, new vantage points have developed, such as the unobstructed view of NASA's Hubble telescope and the perspective gained through unmanned probes sent on reconnaissance missions to the outer reaches of our solar system. These breakthroughs in space exploration reveal many inaccuracies in earlier astronomical conclusions. On August 19, 1977, the American space probe Voyager 2 leaves Cape Canaveral on a several-year journey to the vicinity of this solar system's most distant planets. The Voyager's discoveries challenge many of astronomy's recent conclusions, while fully corroborating ancient knowledge. For the first time, we see images of Uranus. Astonishingly, it is exactly as the Sumerians report in their 6,000-year-old description. Though they have no telescopes that we know of, the Sumerians characterize Uranus as Mash Sig, translated bright greenish. They also explain the unique planetary tilt of Uranus. According to the Sumerians, our solar system was invaded by a planetary body that caused collisions and disrupted the existing order. NASA scientists concur that a collision with a body the size of Earth, traveling at 40,000 miles per hour, could have caused both the orbital skew of Uranus and the devastation apparent from the planet's surface scarring. Its neighbor Neptune was described as a blue-green planet by the Sumerians millennia ago, but science has only confirmed this fact during the past few decades. The Sumerians named and listed all of the planets in our solar system. Their documented list of these planets is tangible evidence that in at least one respect, modern man is on a path of rediscovery.
That ancient knowledge included the planets Uranus and Neptune, supposedly unknown until discovered in 1781 and 1846, and even Pluto, not discovered until 1930.
Neptune, Nudimmud, the artful creator, older than the Incas. The people of this society were called Sumerians, after their land, Sumer, in the great plain between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, today's Iraq. The book of Genesis calls the land Shinear. For generations, biblical scholars either ignore biblical references to ancient kingdoms or categorize these as legend or lore. Through the study of historical relics and the translation of ancient languages, many biblical researchers now believe that the previously questioned Old Testament references are indeed historically authentic accounts of flourishing, advanced cultures.
If you study the Genesis document, God made Adam out of clay and then took Eve out of his rib, one of his ribs, etc. If you study this document, you discover that it is really a much shorter version of a much more complicated document that comes out of Babylonia and then out of Sumer and so on. Now, these ancient texts give a really complicated story of powerful, non-human, godlike beings actually engineering us, making us for specific purposes.
Zechariah Sitchin's investigation into these cultures brings him to this 6,000-year-old temple in an excavated area of the ancient city Erech. Until its discovery only 150 years ago, Erech was known only through passages in the Bible. The temple is dedicated to a female goddess named Inanni, also referred to in later times as Ishtar. Zechariah Sitchin.
You can see here her features a little damaged. Her divinity was marked by the pair of horns that she had. She held a jar with the water of life, and she was surrounded as a decoration, but perhaps also symbolically, with a symbol that some refer to as entwined snakes, which was the symbol of science in those days, 6,000 years ago. Some find in it a precursor of the Egyptian Ankh, which was the symbol of life and creation.
Corner of the universe be considered Genesis revisited. This is the belief of the world-renowned archaeologist, linguist, and expert in the field of cultural anthropology, Zechariah Sitchin.
I'm Zechariah Sitchin. I devoted a lifetime to the study of ancient civilizations, ancient languages, their art, their beliefs, and the knowledge that they had. And the question is, when you study, when you look at all that, is it myth, is it mythology, or did it really happen? I believe it all really happened.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Space is the inescapable challenge to all the advanced nations of the Earth. And it established the United States as the preeminent spacefaring nation. First for the coming decade, for the 1990s, space station freedom. And next, for the new century, back to the moon, back to the future, and this time, back to stay. And then a journey into tomorrow, a journey to another planet, a manned mission to Mars.
A manned mission to Mars? An ambitious objective, and with the success of the Mars probes and NASA's rover, one that humanity has made substantial strides toward achieving. Could there have been a space base on Mars in antiquity?
If we had physical, tangible evidence of artifacts on Mars, we are not only not alone in the universe, but someone has been on the next planet over. That in itself will forever change our frame of reference.
Mankind came out of the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, reached the Age of Enlightenment, experienced the Industrial Revolution, and entered the era of advanced technology, the era of genetic engineering, and the era of spaceflight.
Big shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds forward, drift. We copy you down, Eagle. The Eagle has landed.
Astronauts who land like eagles. Zecharia Sitchin's research reveals that in our ancient past there were advanced beings referred to as the Anunnaki, translated, those who from heaven to earth came.
The idea that there was in our solar system a race of intelligent beings far older than us who are now gone would certainly force us to rethink lots of questions, including the question of human origins. Where did we come from? Could we be the products of genetic engineering?
The hypothesis that modern science is only now catching up with ancient knowledge is inspiring scientists and researchers to increase efforts to rediscover that which may have been lost over time.
It rekindles a situation that has lain dormant almost 5,500 years. The incident of the Tower of Babel. In the Babylonian version of the biblical story, the people of Babylon were building a tower whose head shall reach the heaven, in which a Shem, a space rocket, was to be installed under the direction of their supreme god. But the other deities were not amused by this foray of mankind into the space age.
The biblical story recalls that Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower that the humans were building, and he said to his colleagues in Genesis chapter 11,
"This is just the beginning of their undertakings. From now on, anything that they shall scheme to do shall no longer be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they should not understand each other's speech."
Thanks to the science of archaeology, experts now know that the first great civilization emerged almost 6,000 years ago. Older than the Greeks, older than the Mayans,